The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
Imagine you're playing The Sims, and the character in The Sims is you. And your job is to play yourself and do what you think is the best thing you could do at any given time. To be the best version of what you can be. So obviously, if you're not good at math, you can't just go like, oh yeah, let's become Einstein. You work within the limitations of what you have, obviously. If for a reason you are paralyzed on your legs, you cannot just start running. So you got to work in the limitations you have. As an outsider, you look at your life, you can basically play your own character, and your job is to play it in the best way you deem you can play your own character, being the best version. Now my question is, who here thinks right now they are the best version of themselves within what is possible? Vote yay or vote nay. Do you think you are the best version of yourself, or do you think you can do better and improve? No matter what your scaling is or whatever. Do you think you're the best version of yourself? Yay or nay? So there's about 85% that says no. And that's quite honest. It's a very simple thought experiment, being the best version of yourself. And for everyone, being the best version of yourself is different. It's defined by your own cultural background, conditioning, whatever. The thing is though, you can wonder, would you say, for the people that cannot be the best version of themselves, the difference between being the best version of themselves or not is excuses or being able to get away with it? Vote yay or vote nay? Or do you think that if it wasn't for making excuses or being spoiled or being able to get away with it, you can become the best version of yourself right now? So almost same amount of percent. So I'm going to ask another question. Do you think if you would be your best version of yourself at any given time or work towards it, that you would be a more happy person? Almost 70% thinks so. Okay. I think this is interesting. This is really interesting. So basically, overall, I'm not saying for everyone, but overall, most people think they can be a better version of themselves. They think that what stops them from doing so is being able to get away with it or make excuses. And they know they would be more fulfilled and happy if they would go for it. What I'm just trying to say is that if you feel defenseless, right, or powerless towards your own laziness, very often the reason why you are experiencing that is because your awareness takes into account very little. And when I say awareness, it's merely your neural activity in your brain. Depending on how much neural activity you have in your brain, you're more or less aware. And if you cultivate the ability to have more perspective on life by seeing where life is going to be in 5 years, in 10 years, by really reflecting on these things and training that, you become more and more automatically driven and motivated to do stuff. Because your procrastination is merely the result of your awareness. There is another way of doing it, and it's putting you in a situation where you cannot make excuses, where reality pushes you. That's another way of going about it. I mean, if you, for example, are a very big slacker, going to the military and getting disciplined, because there you cannot slack, helps people cultivate discipline. But the thing is though, I rather like the cognitive approach, where you just lay down and reflect on life and slowly but surely chip away your own laziness, because that's what it is, right? Like comfort is a key ingredient. Comfort right now, not comfort in general, but just comfort right now is a key ingredient of what stops you from being the best version of yourself. Because you know you can be the best version of yourself, you know you're going to be more fulfilled, more happy, but the problem is right now, you just don't have the energy, you don't have the drive to do so. And the reason why that is because your awareness is very focused on just the moment, and you don't look at your own experience, you don't look at your own life as an outsider trying to understand what you can improve. You don't take the role of this third person approach of looking at yourself. And that is something that some people never do. It's something very interesting, but taking the perspective of an outsider when you look at your own life is a very enriching thing to do. It takes some energy, but everybody's capable of doing that. When you're younger, when you're a child, you can't do that. But as you grow older and you basically develop a more intellectual part of the brain, you gain the capacity to look at yourself as an observer, as an outsider. Athene, I have a question. How do you deal with negativity in the world? It's by not focusing on the negativity in the world, but rather focusing on what you can do. Because focusing on the negativity in the world and being bitter about everything makes you part of the problem. And the world is like that because of that mindset. What is much more constructive is just seeing what you can do and where you can contribute. Of course, sometimes it is hard, but if with enough perspective, because that's what I realized also last time, a big issue is a lack of awareness. We really live through life just from the moment to moment, and we don't really put our life in perspective. I actually wonder, did people put their life in perspective a bit and reflected on the talk I had 2 days ago? Because it's a very interesting way of looking at things. The reason why most people are making excuses is not so much because they are, suckers or whatever, but more importantly is because their awareness is just very focused on the now, on the present. And then obviously the path of least resistance is just to procrastinate, because you don't increase your awareness by implementing the future in the now. That's why you also are more impulsive at buying stuff you don't need and just work a job, a 9-to-5 job that has very little fulfillment, and then just spend the money for stuff you don't need and stay in that loop trapped because of a lack of putting things in a bigger awareness. And awareness, you could almost say that awareness is merely the time interval in which you operate. So the higher awareness, the more patient you are, not so much because you enforce it to you, but just because you understand, when I screw myself over right now, I will pay the price tomorrow. And you can basically get that awareness by just projecting yourself in you tomorrow, and you the next week, and you in 5 years, and you in 10 years, and getting that sense of perspective implemented in your life, and really have a routine of constantly saying like, okay, where do I see myself in 10 years? Like if there is a funeral, right? And they're burying me, what are people saying about me? What is it that actually matters to me? These kind of things can greatly help you to turn the path of least resistance in things that are more constructive. Bro, your chances of cancer are pretty much 100% the longer you live. Beaver Ninja, it's actually nice that you bring it up, because that's actually something a lot of people say also when you smoke. You say like, man, everybody's gonna die one day, or this or that. And the reason why people tend to have these very simplistic thoughts to justify their lifestyle or whatever is because your brain is very binary. If you're more an emotional driven person, you just think in black or white, good or bad. And then it's like, the moment you go like, yeah, everybody's gonna have cancer, then it's fine to do what I do. Easy, path of least resistance. The thing is though, nothing is less true than this type of thinking, because everything is probabilities. Cancer is probabilities. And if you can reduce the probability, then you're less likely to get cancer at early age or die earlier. So it's all about life expectancy and probabilities. And the thing is that since we have this tendency to think binary when we don't use our cognitive brain, we can just completely rebuke the facts of reality right in front of us, because it's like, oh yeah, climate change is not true because it's really a cold winter. Or smoking is not bad because I have an uncle that lived until 93 and he was smoking cigars. We tend to use these confirmation biases all the time to confirm our lifestyle, even though statistically speaking, when you smoke, you're just more likely to die early. It's just how it is. And it's because of our impulsive brain and because of our awareness just being connected to this impulsive thinking that we constantly are on this roller coaster of emotions where we just completely ignore the actual cognitive processes that are able to make us see and experience life from a bigger time interval and increase our awareness. And that is why even in debates or even in talks or arguments or whatever, there is very little truth as part of the equation, because people are merely the result of their emotions. People are merely the result of how they feel. And the beauty is, the reason why that is because on a fundamental level, the way you feel, the way you act is based on what provides for your safety, what provides for your ability to survive and thrive. And as humans, we are able to use beliefs and concepts or structures to provide for our safety. And that is much defined by how we were conditioned as we grew up. So basically, if we are conditioned to think or live our life a certain way because within our tribe or intersubjective groups, that is what allowed us to thrive and survive, we will automatically use these patterns even if they are less functional because we don't know any better. But on a fundamental level, we're just wired, like when it comes down to what we value, we just see, okay, this is what provided for our safety as we grew up, therefore this is what is important. And for each person, it's different. Some people, what they value the most is their family, others it is money, the validation of others. Like you can really go to the core and see, okay, this is what I feel most safe with, which is what you're emotionally attached to on a fundamental level, what defines your actions, core value to put it that way. And when you realize that that core value does not apply, you go through a paradigm shift. That's why a lot of people, when they don't live with their parents anymore, they go through a paradigm shift because fundamentally when they were younger, they assumed their parents was what provided for their safety. But as they grow up and they realize they have to live on by themselves, they cannot fall back on that anymore, and then they change. Reality dictates always what the paradigm is that provides for your safety. And that's the beauty. If on a fundamental level, rather than any core value you partake or any core value that provides for your safety, you realize that it is understanding in reality and your cognitive abilities that can provide for your safety more than anything. You can basically connect your emotional drive that we all, because I'm also emotional driven on a core level, to reason and logic. What I wanted to explain you guys earlier is that when you talk to someone, right, they speak from their own experience, just like you speak from your own experience, right? And the words you use and the concepts you use are based on what you've learned and you've gone through. So if you want to understand another person, understanding it through your own experience is not going to work. You literally got to almost like put yourself in the shoes of the other person to understand what he means. Like, for example, if you talk to someone that grew up in a religious family, the way they think will be different based on their experience than if you grew up in an atheist family, right? And even though these things are very fucking simple, it's really so simple to understand. Rarely do we go through the effort to actually try to understand what the other person tries to explain. While when you have a conversation, the goal of the conversation is normally to understand the other person and for the other person to understand you. But we live in such a society where everything is so focused on our own constant desires and pleasures that we don't even go through the effort anymore to listen. And that's why nobody listens to us either. And what you get is, you get this entire reality where you basically are just lonely as fuck because everybody's just busy with themselves and don't even go through the simple effort to try and understand what you're talking about, which is something many are compliant in doing themselves. And the crazy thing is, if you go through this process, not only do people more gravitate towards you, but also when it comes down to conversations, you don't even have so much the need to get validation of other people because you understand they're not listening to you anyway. So yeah, being able to take perspective and such allows you to more and more have a real grasp of what is going on and such. But yeah, what I wanted to say, like, since concepts you use are always attached to emotions, the key is to be as unbiased as possible when you talk about concepts. And you can do so by thinking probabilities, by valuing probabilities. If on a fundamental level, on an emotional level, you really value probabilities and you understand everything is probabilities and you're emotionally attached to that, then you are more easily able to disconnect emotions on concepts and have conversations in an unbiased way. For example, a lot in politics or just a lot in debates and discussions, things are being talked about as if they're absolute. For example, death penalty. Is the death penalty good or bad? The thing is, when you look at reality, you cannot just say whether death penalty is good or bad. It depends on situation. If you live in a medieval times where there is not even prison system or whatever, and people learn through law and order to not do crime, then obviously the death penalty can be an option that would save more lives than one where you would just try and lock them up and they would just escape or whatever. On the other hand, if you have a techno society like we live today, and basically we have the ability to provide for whatever, then death penalty makes no sense. So basically being able to be aware that even like murder, is murder good or bad? You cannot always say murder is bad, even though a lot of people would say, yeah, murder is bad. What if you know someone is going to shoot you or whatever? Then you go like, yeah, that's self-defense. That's not murder. Well, you are killing the person, right? To protect yourself. It's just being able to understand that all these concepts that you have are merely probabilistic and depend on from situation to situation allows you to have a very detached perspective and view on the world, where you don't have these strong political views or whatever the fuck. You just look at reality and you adapt and are flexible based on what you think and how you look at things. I want to say something because one guy says now in the chat, murder is the unlawful killing of another human without justification or valid excuse. Well, there you already go. Murder is the unlawful killing. So basically the killing which is not allowed based on the law. So from Sharia law, you're allowed to kill because it's not unlawful. So you're moving the problem to the law, while the law is written by people. So you have countries, well, you have societies or even cultures or whatever, where killing is lawful. Therefore, unlawful killing is not murder, but you would see it and perceive it as murder. So it's all relative from the reference frame.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.